The path to a better life begins with a simple step. Empower Radio presents Simple Steps, Real Change with Cheryl Maloney. Empower Radio. EmpowerRadio.com. Here's your host, Cheryl Maloney.
Well, hi, everyone. Did you ever have a time in your life where someone told you you couldn't do something? I remember as a child, my father had dropped a cotter pin on the gravel, and I went looking for it, and he said, "You will never find that." And of course, I picked it up and handed it to him. And all of a sudden, I became the person that proved my dad wrong. Well, our guest tonight was pretty much told that he needed to leave school because he really wasn't going to make it or make it well. He wasn't going to amount to anything. Well, he went on not only to prove them wrong, but become a professor who teaches others. My guest tonight is S.L. Young, and he is an amazing inspiration to me because he did what someone said he couldn't do, and he did it because he wanted to do it, because he was passionate about making himself the person that he believed he could be, even if others didn't. So, Stacy, welcome to the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
I am just grateful that you're here because you truly have proved so many people in your life wrong. How does that feel?
You know, I try not to focus on what others have thought about me, but I take pride in the fact that in spite of all the challenges that I've faced, and I faced some considerable educational challenges, that I was able to persevere to reach my goals because I had a dream.
Well, and see, that's a wonderful way to look at it because you're focusing on the positive. But tell the audience, since you're new to my audience, tell the audience what some of those challenges were.
Yeah, so, you know, my challenges started back in high school. I had some bad situations that happened to me. And sometimes when we have these bad things happen and it really wasn't your fault, sometimes it turns you into an individual that you really aren't. But if you have a reputation of being bad and that's what folks think about you, even if you're not really bad, then sometimes it changes the direction of your life. And that's what happened with me because I was accused of doing something I didn't do. And when folks found out that I was supposedly accused of doing something and it was related to drugs, there was like a sort of a bad boy image that was associated with me. And it gave me a lot of respect, negative respect in so many ways. And I got attention that I wasn't getting at home. So I said, if I'm getting more attention now for doing this bad thing that I didn't do, well, I might as well live up to the reputation. And oh, brother, did I live up to the reputation. So what ended up happening is my sophomore year of high school, I ended up failing 6 out of 7 classes. And after I failed those classes, there was a parent-teacher conference, and the direction that was provided to me was, Stacy needs to leave school. He's not going to do well. This isn't the right environment for him. He needs to go find a job. And I don't know if my mom was the smartest woman in the world or the craziest at that moment, but she looked me in my eye and she said to me, it's your life. It's your choice. You make a decision right now. And that was the best thing that she could have ever done for me because I had to be accountable and responsible for my actions for the first time in my young life. And I made a decision to stay in school. And just a little bit more, I mean, it wouldn't be easy for me to continue on. When I was writing my book about my educational journey, I realized for the first time that I was on the verge of failing 10th grade a second time if I hadn't changed schools, started to make some adjustments, ended up graduating in the bottom 8% of my class in high school, went to 2 colleges, didn't do well, and then finally was able to connect with the process of learning once I got to American University.
Well, so it really sounds like you overcame so many failings, as you put them, because you had this desire to persevere. You had the desire to turn your life around. Like you said, you had to get to the right place in order to be able to do that. And that was a university that obviously connected with you and resonated with what you were thinking and feeling.
Yeah, and that was definitely the case. And it actually started a little bit before that because in high school, I wasn't doing really well. In college, when I had, I took a couple of attempts at college and didn't do well. But once I got into a corporate environment and I was doing the work and I was excelling in that environment and doing work similar to what was going on in college, I started to ask the question, well, what's the difference? But the main thing that I think that drove me towards success was working around folks that were seeking a higher level of success also. So they were looking to obtain their master's degrees, and there was a program at the company that I worked at. And so when I spoke with these individuals that I work with, and they were pursuing their goals, and they had higher aspirations, and I was doing well at work, then it started to click, and I said, you know what, well, why can't I give this another try? If these folks that I'm working with are doing it, why can't I do it too? And I went in the back door at American University, and I said, hey, I am not a good student. I haven't been a good student. And they said, we have a non-degree program. Take some classes non-degree, and if you maintain a close to a 3.0 GPA at the end of the time when you apply for admission, you can be admitted. So sometimes we can't get in the front door. Sometimes we have to go in the back door to get what we want.
Well, and that's just a wonderful representation, because we think that because one door closes, it's closed forever, or there isn't another way around it. But you've just shown how you're able to say, you know what, I'm going to find a way because this is important enough to me. And it obviously meant something to you.
Yeah, it definitely meant something to me. And a lot of folks ask me a lot of time, well, you know, what pushed you to move forward? And I really just normally just say, I just made a decision to move forward. And for me, it was a moment I was standing in front of a McDonald's, and I looked at the McDonald's, and I don't even know why I had this internal conversation that day, but I said, I don't want to work at McDonald's for the rest of my life. And there's nothing wrong with working at a McDonald's. It just wasn't what I wanted for my life. And that was the moment of recognition that I had a plan, or better put, I had a vision for my life, and I needed to work towards it to fulfill it.
So at that moment, what was your vision?
Prior to that moment, I didn't have any. I was just...
But no, at that moment, when you realized you had a vision, what was your vision?
Well, my vision was that I wanted to have a better life, and I didn't know what it exactly entailed, but what I knew was a good connector between where I was and where I wanted to be was education.
That's quite a long journey from being told that you needed to leave school to realizing school was your ticket to where you wanted to go.
Right. And, you know, to this day, I don't know what was inside of me that made me believe that, but I knew that I needed to get a good education to give myself a fighting chance. And maybe what it was is I always believed in myself, and I knew that I was capable of more, and I realized that I just wasn't in the right environment, but I just didn't know how to ask for the environment that I needed to be in.
Well, and how amazing is it that your mother gave you the advice and the choice that she gave you, and that's to make your own decision, because sometimes you get told what to do and you feel like you have to just do what you're told, but your mother gave you the freedom to succeed or not.
Exactly. And my mom is an incredibly strong woman, and my mom knows her children well, and she knew, I think, in her heart what I was going to do and what I was capable of, but she knew that she could not live my life for me, and I needed to make decisions on my own because I needed to live with the outcome or the consequences of my own actions and choices. So I needed to be responsible at that moment, and that's what she did. She said, you're responsible. And when my mom looked me in the eye when I was sitting in the principal's office, you know, I had a fear of a lot of things in me at that moment, but I still had my mom had the faith in me to make the right choice.
Oh, that's just wonderful. So as you're teaching now, and you're encountering young folks that are making decisions about their lives, how are you helping them to realize that they have choices that they can make too?
Well, it's interesting because a traditional approach to teaching classes, a lot of times, and I'm just speaking from my experiences when I was in the classroom, there was a lot of passive teaching where a lot of information was pushed toward me as a student, and I didn't connect to that type of teaching method. So what I try to do as a professor is integrate the things that I liked and the things that I think could have been done better in the classroom. So I try to create an environment that we have the passive approach for part of the class, but I also like to create an active environment so that I'm allowing students to connect with the process of learning and not just regurgitation, but understanding what things mean and connecting the dots. But I think the biggest value add that I'm bringing to the classroom right now is I just don't teach terminology, and I just don't teach business. I teach business and life because business and life requires an integration strategy, and we need to move beyond the terminology to make it real so that it actually connects with the students, so it's meaningful for them, and that's what I didn't get, and that's what caused me to take a longer path towards connecting with the process of learning because it wasn't meaningful to me.
Well, and as you're talking about this longer path, in some ways, that path was exactly what you needed to take, one, to get to where you are right now, but also to be able to convey that to your students.
I totally agree. Not during the time that I was going through it, mind you, right? But now when I look back, I am on the journey that I was supposed to be on. And for a short period of time, I got off the path that I believe that I was destined to be on. And now what I've learned as I wrote about my story and as I experience things now, and if I can just take a quick moment just to share a story, because sometimes life is, I think, planned for us in different ways than we could ever imagine. But as I wrote my book about my educational journey, one of the things that I had that my mom kept, and it's just incredible that my mom kept this, was a note from my first grade teacher, Mrs. Powell. And Mrs. Powell wrote a note, and also the teacher, a student age, Miss Washington, wrote a note as well. But what Miss Powell wrote, she said that Stacy is an asset to the classroom. He's my right arm, and he helps those students that aren't as gifted. And when I wrote my book, that was the first moment that I realized that I've always been a teacher. And now my teaching is being manifested in a lot of different ways, in the classroom, through my writing, on my blog, on my website, and with Huffington Post, but also in my outreach to at-risk individuals in jails and in other communities. I'm a teacher, and I've always been a teacher, and that's what I love to do, and that's where my passion is.
And this passion, even though you say you knew this, literally, it was in you from first grade. When was it that you realized that this truly was your passion? It might have been there, but when did it sink in that this was your passion?
It really was, I credit it to an individual that I work with at a corporation where I was managing a strategic initiative. And I love managing projects and making things happen, but this individual spoke to me after a team meeting that I had, and I had the ability to make a decision about something for my team, but I didn't want to make that decision alone. So I brought my team in, and we all collaborated and brainstormed, and we came up with a team decision. And then after that meeting, he said to me, "Stacy, you inspire me." And he had me watch a couple of videos, and I watched them, and I said, "I can do this, I can do better." And he said, "I know." And sometimes destiny comes towards us, whether we're ready for it or not. That conversation happened in May. 2 months later, I received an email from someone that went to American University also that was looking for someone who was interested in going on the other side of the classroom to become a teacher. And I said, why not, after that conversation, that knowing that someone that worked for me told me that I inspired him. And I took my efforts to the classroom, and I haven't left. I went in the classroom in 2008, and I'm still there, and I'll be there as long as I possibly can because this is what I'm meant to do.
So right now, tell the audience a little bit, where are you teaching and what are you teaching right now?
I'm teaching at the Northern Virginia Community College, and I teach a little bit of everything in business. I teach everything from introduction to business, marketing, business communication, management, small business management. So there's a lot of things that I teach, and I absolutely love it. And I also teach at a local jail where I teach inmates about business, life, and soft skills also.
Wow. So let me ask a question. As you got into school, you said you were working for a corporation. What made you decide you wanted to pursue an MBA? And in finance and investments, no less.
I have to laugh because I didn't. When I was going through my undergraduate degree, I wasn't even considering getting my MBA. And after my long journey towards academic success, and just to get that degree, most folks would have taken it and run and said, "I did it, it's done, I'm over." But something was inside of me, and I said, you know what? I'm in this flow right now of learning. If I don't go on to graduate school now, I won't be able to complete it. And I just know myself. So I said, I need to go ahead and pursue this dream. But again, I still had another challenge because my GPA was good. Well, it was average to good. And it wasn't enough to get into grad school directly because I did some research, figured out what the magic number was to get into the George Washington University at the time. And I realized that my chances to get in were, 50-50. So I didn't want to apply and then be told that I can't apply again for a while. So what I did was utilize something that I learned at American. I went in the back door, and I took classes non-degree to prove that I could do the work, and then applied for admission.
Wow. So all through your learning career, you had hurdles. You had things, as you said, that you didn't connect with, but ultimately you knew that you wanted to make that connection. So you figured out a way around it. Just that resourcefulness is inspiring, because you just can't give up when somebody says no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's really three things, if I can.
Sure.
One is belief. You've got to have a belief in yourself, even when nobody else does. Even when things are going really, really bad, you've got to continue to believe. And I'll tell you, it hasn't always been easy, but whenever I get knocked down, I might be knocked down for a moment, and then I'm like, okay, you can do this. And I give myself that pep talk, that self-talk that keeps me going. So that's one. The second thing is choice. We all have the power of choice. We can make a decision to say, I got knocked down and stay there. Or you can say, I got knocked down. That wasn't all that bad. I'm going to pick myself up, dust myself off, and I'm going to keep moving forward. And then the third thing is resilience. You've got to be resilient, because we're all going to face some type of life challenge. Some are going to be really, really bad. Some aren't going to be so bad. But our ability to continue to persevere and move forward in spite of these things that have happened is the thing that makes the difference between those who are successful and those that could be successful, because I don't like to use the other word.
And I like that. And truly what it gets down to is every time you get knocked down, you've picked yourself back up, and you realize in that moment you're stronger than you thought you were. Well, I can get through that, so I can get through anything. You just pick up, as you say, that resilience. But it is a choice to get back up. What do you say to the folks that you're talking to, and you work with folks that are in jail? What do you say to those folks who said, yeah, I'm just a product of the system and this is all it's ever going to be? How do you help them see that that's not true?
The easy answer would be I tell them my story, but it's more than that. I just don't tell them my story. I work to make a personal connection with each of these men by looking them in their eyes, respecting them, and treating them the same way I would treat anybody else that is in one of my classes. Because even though a lot of times when I'm in the jail environment, I'm teaching right there in the housing unit, and these guys don't have to be there. But what I work very, very hard to do is to develop the relationships, make the connections, let them know that I'm being real and genuine and that I really, truly care about them. And I do that by looking them in the eye every time I speak to them.
That respect probably carries more weight than any lesson you could ever teach them, because they feel then that they're worthy, and they are.
Mm-hmm.
I look at situations like this and I admire, because you work so much with at-risk communities, and you are out there helping people others who have given up on. And that's so much the way your story started, was you started with someone in education giving up on you, but you never gave up on yourself.
There's moments that I've been, I like to say I've been bent all the way almost to the ground, but I have not been broken yet. And, if we could just take it a little bit further, because I would love to share an even more personal story that I've just started to share with folks recently about my life earlier this year and the darkest moments of my life.
Go right ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, so in March of this year, I was at one of my darkest days, and I was on the verge of committing suicide. It wasn't something that I was thinking about. I woke up that morning, and it was the darkness was in the room. And I reached out to my brother, because I take care of my mom, and I called my brother and I said, hey, I just need to make sure that if something happens to me, that you're going to be there to take care of our mom. And through that conversation, I started to break down, and then my brother started to ask questions, and then I hung up the phone, and he kept calling back until he got me. And then he said to me during the conversation, when he got back to me, and he was trying to convince me that I could make it through the moment, because, life is about cumulative moments. And he said, use your own books to save yourself. And that was sort of like a watershed moment for me, because it was like just a splash of cold water on me. And then he said, talk to our sister also. So then I had a conversation with our sister. And that same afternoon, 3 or 4 hours after I was moments from committing suicide, I got up and I went to the jail to teach. And those two things that were really, really significant was, one, having my mom that I cared about, and two, having something else that I cared about. And I knew those men were counting on me to be there, even though I was going through a personal meltdown moment. But let me just tell you, what's the benefit of getting up? A couple of months later, I decided to write my story to share with others that might have similar challenges and they are feeling down and out and desperation and despair. So I wrote the book about my depression and near suicide. And then a couple of months later, there was an incident, Robin Williams' death. And I saw somebody write on Facebook, and they made a flip comment and said, how could somebody throw away their life like that? And it was at that moment I said, I need to say something, and I need to respond to this post, because folks just don't understand, because you never know what somebody else is going through. And, and I didn't even realize it until it happened to me, where folks said, oh, my gosh, this person committed suicide. I never saw it coming. Well, I never saw it coming that day. It was just there. And then the next day I decided to share information about my journey even more, and I fully disclosed to my Facebook family and friends about my depression and near suicide. And then the next week I went on a radio show and disclosed, to a nationwide audience my struggles. And then a couple of weeks after that, I wrote some articles about it, and I shared it with the Huffington Post. And then Huffington Post then asked me to become a blogger on their site. And so over the last 30 days, I've been writing about a lot of different things, and a couple of my articles about depression are, have been well connected with the audience. And I have a piece that's out there right now. And I think right before I got on the phone, got ready for this interview, it was right about 300 likes. And now I'm writing about my journey to help and others to understand depression, but also to help others who feel like they're about to give up. 7 months ago, I was moments from committing suicide. Today, my life has purpose, and now I'm delivering on that purpose, because had I committed suicide, I would have cheated not only myself, but I would have cheated all these other folks that I've helped through my writing, my teaching, my speaking, and everything else. So when you have that moment, understand it is a moment, and let that moment pass. Think about what your future is and continue to move forward, because there's some wonderful things ahead if you allow yourself to get past that moment.
Well, and Stacy, the power in just telling your story and share that with others, it's the reason Simple Steps got started in the first place, is so others would know they're not alone in what they're going through. And by doing that and sharing, because the depth of your story and the potential tragedy of your story then becomes something that helps others prevent that tragedy in their own lives. So we're getting close to the end of the show here, and I want to make sure that before we leave, you have a chance to tell folks a little bit about your book and how to read more about your journey and what you're helping others to learn.
Great. Well, thank you. So my books I like to say, are solution-oriented. So I don't just tell my story, but I provide some advice. I don't tell you what to do or to think, but I give you some things to think about. So all of my books are available on my website at slyoung.com, and they're also available on Amazon.com and some of the other outlets as well. So some of my books there's the inspirational series, It's a Crazy World, Learn From It, which was very pivotal in helping me recover from my depression. So there's part 1, taking care of me. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of anyone else. Part 2, moving forward, once you've dealt with the things that are bothering you, you're ready to move forward. Part 3, keeping it going. Once you get to that good place, you can keep moving forward. And then part 4 is the journey continues to move forward towards a fulfilled life. My other books are Above Expectations, My Story, An Unlikely Journey from Almost Failing High School to Becoming a College Professor. Bullies, They're in Your Office Too, Could You Be One? And that is a wonderful solution-oriented book for folks that are dealing with workplace bullying, because bullying happens in the workplace also. And the last book that that my major book that I have is Choosing to Take a Stand, Change Me, My Life, and My Destiny. And it talks about my process of how do I get to the moment of depression and near suicide, and how did I come out of that. And then you can also check for some of my other books that will help on soft skills like time management, belief, negotiation, communication, and things of that nature. So definitely check out my work at slyoung.com, and also look for my articles on Huffington Post.
Wonderful. Well, Stacy, thank you so much for being here with us today. Your story is an inspiration, but I also love that you're there to not only inspire others, but to help them through. Just like you're doing at the jails, you're doing it on a big scale. And I really appreciate you being that role model for so many and that hand for so many. So thank you for being with us here tonight.
And thank you for having me.
Everyone, thanks for joining me. This is Cheryl Maloney, and you have been listening to my guest, S.L. Young. And you can read more and learn more about his offerings at slyoung.com. Have a great week.